Back to one of our top stories, Iraq's parliament putting the formation of a new government on hold until they try again next week, delaying the first step in forming a more inclusive government, with embattled Prime Minister al-Maliki showing no sign that he is willing to step down. Meanwhile, the UN says more than 2,400 people were killed in Iraq last month as ISIS militant forces control a third of the country. Now that group's leader is calling on Muslims to come to Iraq and Syria and help him build a, quote, Islamic State, as President Obama sends 200 more American troops to Iraq to help secure our embassy and the Baghdad airport. Let's talk about it all with Lisa Daftari, a Mideast journalist and Fox News contributor. Lisa, good to see you today.
Good to be back.
What do you make of this fact that we are continuing to very slowly and in tiny increments continue to send personnel into this situation? The president has a lot to consider here.
Right, he does have a lot to consider, and this is the right move for the moment. I mean, you can compare this to a hospital, and as patients come in, the first step is to stabilize, and the second step is to triage. So in stabilizing the situation, the only thing that the U.S. can do right now is to make sure that our personnel are safe there. If there should be a time where we need to evacuate, that they have ways of getting them out safely. But looking at the larger picture, how can we really stabilize the situation? It's going to take a lot more than just 800 of our people there on the ground. But the more important thing is to really focus on the national security threat and how it grows.
Well, and so much of this revolves now around al-Maliki, who there are growing calls in Washington and across the world for him to potentially step down. So they had this first parliamentary get-together today talking about being more inclusive. Didn't go so well. The Sunnis and Kurds walked out. We talked with Senator Lieberman earlier about this today, and he said, well, I view that as a negotiating tactic. They'll be back. There will be progress at some point. Do you think it's more serious than that?
It's much more serious than that. What we have to understand is we as Americans are coming in the middle of the movie, right? Let's rewind a bit till 2006 when al-Maliki came into this government. He was a reactionary type of leader, meaning he's Shiite, he's going to lead the government, and he's going to marginalize the Sunnis and the Kurds. I mean, Saddam Hussein was marginalizing the Shiites. So what we have here is years and years of resentment by the Sunnis and the Kurds. And we have, for that reason, this instability and the sectarianism that has evolved throughout the years. And a lot of these unhappy Iraqis are fighting alongside ISIS. It's not just this terrorist element that's coming in and taking over. Obviously, the opportunity is ripe for them to come in and take over. We have to understand that the Kurds and Sunnis, they're not going to back down this easily anytime soon.
Well, a lot of folks will say the U.S. should step back from its role there, which we've clearly done. I mean, that was clearly what President Obama campaigned on and what he's done for the most part in watching this play out. But saying that there's so many internal divisions, they are deep, they are wide, they are very old, and we're not going to be able to step in and resolve that with a few troops on the ground or even a few airstrikes. I mean, it's something that's far beyond that.
Right, and we have to really look at, as you said, at the situation very, very carefully. If we look at, pushing al-Maliki out of government, right? So we think we're going to stabilize, we're going to get a new prime minister, a new president, a new speaker. What are you going to get? America is very good at creating political vacuums, not so good at filling them. Let's look at history, very recent history. The Arab Spring turned to Arab Nightmare. We created all these political vacuums, and who is there to take over? All these extremist elements who are hovering over, and ISIS has not been shy about telling us what their agenda is. They want to come in, they want to create a state. So we don't really want to create a political vacuum and want to have al-Maliki empty his seat until we know that we have a viable person to take his spot. And whether the sectarian violence, sectarianism is going to be, it's not going to be corrected with a new leader. So this is going to be a long time of instability in the region.
And then we know the seeds of what's happened now, what we're watching play out with ISIS, were planted long ago, but it did seem to those who weren't carefully tracking it that it happened very quickly, this amount of territory that they've taken over in the north. So were we caught off guard? Where do we go now?
It goes right back to Syria, and it goes back to actually watching ISIS for a decade. They started out in Iraq, right, and they were unhappy about the U.S. coming in. Then they, in 2013, saw a ripe opportunity in Syria, so they popped over there. They created these strongholds in Syria. They were doing mass executions. They were doing crucifixions, actually in public, and having little children watch, right? So for people who are watching this, ISIS has been on a roll for a very long time. And what happened? They took their victories very strategically, come back into Iraq. From the north, they take their Sunni constituencies along with them. They get strongholds within Iraq. They bypass the Kurdish areas because they know that they're not going to have, obviously, much help there, and they're coming down towards Baghdad. And what do? They threaten to go down into the Shiite held territories in the south, where there are shrines and historical sites, and that's where the Iranian regime is alerted, and they want to come in and protect their elements in there as well.
So much nuance to these problems.
So much.
Lisa, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.